Okay, I'm starting, I guess. I'm Sarah Scott. I've been a member here for about 18 years. I have 3 sons, 18-year-old twins, Cameron and Clayton. Clayton is severely multiply impaired. Cameron is not impaired at all, if you want to say that. And they also have a younger brother, Logan, who's 16. What a lot of people don't know about Clayton, people might know Clayton because he's loud and he's around, and if you get too close to him, he may grab you in the hallway and make you sing Old MacDonald. But he was born fine. My twins were premature, about 11 weeks. Clayton was born completely fine, great APGAR scores, and then on the second day of life, he contracted Pseudomonas meningitis, which took his eyes. We think it probably caused the cerebral palsy that he has. We're very fortunate it did not take his hearing. So that's something a lot of people don't know, that he was born fine and he had eyes for 2 days. Now he is severely multiply impaired, like I said. He has no vision at all, cerebral palsy, and he's developmentally about a 3-year-old, 4-year-old. So my big challenge is dealing with an 18-year-old toddler. So that's been kind of the adventure that my life is going into. So Clayton's grown up in this church. He spent some time living away at a facility for children who were blind and had at least one other impairment. So he spent about 6 years there, and at that time I kind of took a break from church in general. Didn't really know quite how to incorporate it into our lives. He was coming home on the weekends, and that was the only time I really spent with him. But we did come back. He went through the confirmation process. Cindy and one of the youth from the church shared being his covenant partner, and the curriculum was adapted, and the group was wonderful, and the class was great. And so he was confirmed at the same time as his brother, which was very, very meaningful to our family. Meant a lot to his brother, meant a lot to all of us. So church is kind of a place that he really enjoys. He loves being here. The challenge we're having now is that he's 18, so he's getting ready to move on from AIM support. Sunday school is not, 18-year-olds don't go to Sunday school. 18-year-olds sit at church if they come to church at all, which is another story. So Clayton's learning to sit in church. So we move around the sanctuary to annoy people all over. So if you find us near him, or if you find us near you, you might hear some noises, or you might get touched, hugged, your hand might get held. But he loves it here, and it's very important. And it's important to his brothers and us as a family. It's something normal we can do. Typical families get up, they go to church on Sundays, their kids at 16 and 18, their kids get up, they argue, but they get dressed and get out of the house, and you go to brunch. Doesn't always happen for us, but at least we can try. So that's been really important to us. So what else did you want me to say?
What inclusion means to you as far as this church, and what the congregation as a church family, how do we respond to Christ's call for inclusion? How do we be better Christians serving you? And also, I want to kind of celebrate the gifts that you and your children bring. I also do want to just say one thing that I should have mentioned earlier. The panelists brought up a really good point when we were talking about having this, and that was that they wanted this to be a very safe conversation. And so we often get hung up in stumbling over our own feet on what is the political correct way to say something. Is it disabilities? Is it special needs? Does your child have autism? Is he autistic? And we are so busy worrying about how we say something that we're afraid to have the conversations. And so this today they have asked, and I'm so grateful to you for that this be a safe place and we not worry about what we ask or how we ask something or what we say. If you have a question, ask it. If you have a comment, share it, because this is a time for us to have a conversation, not a lecture.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank Joanne for giving us the opportunity to talk about our children. And to introduce myself, I'm Sujay Galen, and joining me is Ted, my wife, this morning. We are probably the youngest or the newest family here in this congregation. We came to this congregation last July, thanks to the Chaos who introduced us to First Presbyterian Church. Rather, should I say, thanks to their daughter, Claudine, who met Sophie in school. And through Claudine, we came to meet their family. And then it was the two children who actually brought her to the church. So here you go, that's the first point. We sometimes see these children as children with special needs. Yet, these are children who can make meaningful relationships, make good friendships, and bring people together. They have that opportunity and they have that ability. So to kind of go back to where we came from, we moved to US from Scotland, believe it or not. I don't look very Scottish, but when I talk about it, I just sound to be bad. But that's where we started our lives together. That's me and my wife, Ted. And Sophie arrived pretty much a year or two after our wedding and our marriage together. And at that time, it was I would say, a shock to the system in many ways, because as a young couple, we were expecting a child, as they say, the perfect child. You know, you want everything to be perfect and everything to be fine. And Sophie, till the point she was born, we weren't aware that she has Down syndrome. And we first knew about it on the night she was born. It was a long labor process. I was with Ted the whole time, and I was in the operating room. And both of us, being in the medical field, kind of knew immediately, although it wasn't told to us, that something wasn't right. And as Sarah was saying, you know, we said, okay, all is well, should be fine. And there comes the consultant and tells us, yeah, your daughter has Down syndrome. And when those words hit you, it hits you very hard. And you're like, why did this happen to me? Why us? And why me? And that night, it was about 4 a.m. in the morning. I left Ted and I went home to change and come back in the morning to see both of them. And in the nursery, there was Sophie. It was very easy to pick her up because all the other children were Scottish. And Sophie, of course, has got the Asian trait. You can see right away, that's my daughter. So I went and picked her up. And right away, she opened her eyes. And that was the first connection I made with her daughter, with my daughter. And I said to myself in my mind, if she can relate to me and if she can look at me, I can take her and accept her as my own daughter. And from that point onwards, I think the first year or so, it was very difficult for us as a family. One of the things we find as a family often is when we go into a community like this, what are we imposing on them? It was sometimes we feel like, are we taking Sophie in? And because we take Sophie in, are we in any way causing some kind of a disruption in that continuum, in the conversation? Let's say if there's a program, there's something that children have to participate. Will Sophie really participate? Is she going to be a barrier to other children enjoying the event or coming together? We think often about that. And one of the things I would say, coming to this church, we still feel very welcome here. And I'm grateful to all of you. And the families here embraced us. Thanks to Joanne, thanks to Cindy. They all spoke to us the very first week, tried to learn about Sophie, tried to see how Sophie can fit into this family here. And we have enjoyed that tremendously. And then we met the Painter family, and they brought Joshua along. And then Joshua, Claudine, and Sophie are now like a team together. They come together, and every Sunday morning when we wake up, we'll say to Sophie, Sophie, what day is today? And Sophie would say, oh, today I'm going to meet Claudine and Joshua. Before she says Sunday, she knows it's time to meet Claudine and Joshua. So that's what the church has brought for us, a sense of belonging, where we feel that Sophie can go and enjoy her time with her friends and with families, and to meet with them every Sunday. Although she meets with them in school every day, this is another venue for her to meet. But more importantly, learn about Christ and the love of Christ through her friends, through the family, and through the church. So that was kind of all the points I had in mind to share with you in terms of how this church has helped us grow and also helped us to feel belong here very much. And in terms of, Joanne was talking about how our children bring different gifts and give different talents. Now, Sophie has, as I said, with Down syndrome, she also has communication problems. So sometimes she likes to say things, but she doesn't know how to say it. And one way of saying it is through her actions. So let me put it mildly. So for example, somebody would say to her, hey, Sophie, how are you? And she may not know how to respond back to that. And she might just say, she wants to give a hug back. So impromptu, she would go and hug them. And in the process of hugging, she might squeeze them too tight. And the person might go, what's going on here? And then they might say, oh, take your hands on me, or something like that comes back. And then Sophie doesn't understand what they're trying to say. And this kind of escalates into a kind of a situation where she doesn't know how to disentangle untangle herself from that situation. And she finds herself a little bit like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. Or sometimes when somebody wants to play with her, and she's a single child, of course, in the family, so she gets everything at home, but she doesn't know how to share. And when sometimes she's asked to give things or take things away from her, she thinks, this is not how it happens, so I shall take it all away from myself and keep it to myself. So she is learning as she's growing into this community, and that's something we're very grateful for. But more importantly, in terms of her gifts and talents, she's a very loving child. Every morning she will wake up and the first thing she says to me is, I love you, Daddy. And for me as a parent, every day to hear that is a great thing. And I would like her to meet you all and to also love you all. And I think knowing that somebody like that with that special need has the capability to love us brings us a lot of happiness. And I think that's how we can make each other happy. And that's all I want to share. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Adams, and thank you all for coming. My husband Jim is in the back there, and my son Aiden. We also have 3 daughters. Jim has 3 daughters from the first marriage, so I'm a stepmom, and Aiden, and we're also grandparents, and so Aiden's Uncle Aiden. We have number 5 on the way. So that's kind of what our family looks like. First of all, at 17 months, Aiden was born, the APGAR scores, all that stuff was all fine. And then at 17 months, they had a well visit. They noticed something physical first, and then it kind of snowballed from that point. But at 17 months, we started our journey with occupational physical therapy and speech therapy. And didn't get the diagnosis of autism until he was between 4 and 5. And then since then, it's just kind of been a, kind of a snowball thing. We've had sensory integration disorder, ADD, all that good stuff. So that's kind of what we deal with at home. And Joanne also wanted us to talk about what makes you feel like belonging to a church. And when I thought about that, I looked up the definition of inclusion, and it said making someone or something a part of something larger to ensure that a person feels they belong, are engaged, and connected. Inclusion is a universal human right. It is someone feeling respected and valued. And when asked what makes us feel part of the church, I think First Presbyterian Church nailed it with their welcoming dinners. I mean, I have never, ever received anything even remotely close to that in all the years of belonging to a church. Me and Jim were kind of overwhelmed, going into people's homes and going into the pastor's home, and, it was just overwhelming, but it really, what a huge impact it had on us as a family, making us feel that we were wanted. Like you were saying, you're wondering if you're going to fit, and you guys were just kind of open-armed. And when we came in the first day looking, Jim and I had the day off, and we kind of stumbled in here. We had the luck of meeting Joanne and Cindy and John, all the 3 of them were here that first day, and then the emails and everything. So that to us definitely makes us feel definitely part of the church. What are things that you want other people to know to make you feel more part of the whole? This kind of made Jim and I, it sounded more like my opportunity to talk and explain a few things about Aiden personally. Aiden loves to come into the church, and he's enamored with the music and the choir, and he has to get his hugs from the choir. Otherwise, he has a hard time sitting through church. So it's this fascination with music, and there's something about the robes, because we also notice that when the robes are off, he has no interest whatsoever. So there's something angelic. I mean, and he loves music. And I was also asked one time, why does he plug his ears. Or the headphones. And a perfect explanation is he feels more in control of what's coming in. It's kind of a sensory thing. I sometimes feel bad when he's like this and someone's singing a solo. It's not because they sound bad, it's because he just wants control over the noise. He loves music. So that's kind of one thing about Aiden. One of the first things he was diagnosed with was he was severely hypotonic. So that's low tones. So if everybody's singing Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow. He's very fluid moving. He doesn't know where he ends and his environment begins. So there's a spatial thing going on. So he has that kind of as a, he's very, he really, really needs sensory. He loves touch. So like in school, one of his IEP goals was to get him not to need the wall as he walked down a hallway. So there's a lot of physical issues and challenges that he has along with the neurological stuff. And I wanted to, and that was another thing about, the touching and, when a lot of times, and he's also going to be 15, so whenever a cute young girl goes by, it's big hug, and when they're younger and they're smaller, we can get away with that easier, but when he's 5'8" or 9 and he's, it gets a little intimidating, so that's kind of stuff we're working on. And then one of the last points Joanne wanted us to touch on was how do we make inclusion a broader part of our culture? And I'm going to use Pastor John for this because I love the fact that at the end of his service, he presents us with a challenge. And it's kind of like what we're doing here, I feel like, it's his way of, as a coach, if we were all a basketball team and we were on the bench, he's putting us all in the game. He's saying, here, get in the game. So I kind of looked at what we're doing today is, we're putting you in the game. We're giving you some information so that you can be put into the game. When you walk out these doors here and you're at work or with your friends or at the theater or in a restaurant, we all become educators. And we help spread the awareness. And it's the ripple effect that we can have here and spread out into the community. So I hope that made sense. So, okay. So that's my 2 cents, 10 cents.
Questions, comments?
I have a question about the headphones a little bit more, if you could talk about that a little bit more about, are the headphones used just by children with autism, or does that apply to all of you? And how does that, when you say it helps with information or gives them some control over the environment, when they put the headphones on, does that mean that they don't hear anything, or is it just muted, or what happens there?
I would encourage you to put some on. Just put them on. It doesn't mute all the sound. It just, to me, it's like, I was at a concert a few weeks ago in a room that was like this. And when you sat in the room, it was just almost too much to stand. Like, I couldn't stand it. But as soon as I stepped behind the closed doors, I could still hear the music. And it actually was better, far more pleasing to sit way far away from it. So that's kind of how I see it. For my son, though, he gets a little, it's harder for him because that's his hearing is his thing. So for Clayton at least, he does a lot of wiggling around and moving around, and he'll grab me and have me hold one ear, or he'll lay in my lap, or he'll rock and twist, turn his head and that sort of thing. And that's all how he manages the sound. So I don't know about particular with Aiden and the headphones, but I would encourage you to just try them on, just to see what it's like.
Yeah, they definitely, he can still hear, but it is definitely muted. I know we were doing Anna and I had done the autism.
That's what I'm thinking about right now. The autism hour that we do in the Birmingham district, we talk about the senses are either overreactive or underreactive with autism. And when you meet one person with autism, meet one person with autism, because they're all different with everything. So the headphones for Jamie is too much. He wants that control, like Aiden. So you see me holding my hands over his ears. It's almost a protection, a kind of, you go into something you're not sure about. It's just a protection, and then you're gonna see him doing this a little bit to hear it. It's just him trying to take care of himself a little bit. But again, it's going into a big room. Remember, the senses are all over the place, and if they're hyperactive to sound and can hear too much, he can hear, I tell in our discussion on oversensitivity to sound. One day I was coming home and driving him home from school, a beautiful spring day. The windows were down, we put music on, we stopped at the light, and he said to me, "Mama, listen, crickets."
Oh, wow.
I couldn't hear anything.
You could hear.
I had to turn the music off, and I really had to listen. And that, as a mother, told me how overreactive to sound was. So it's just a tool, and again, it's something that he has in the classroom, and he can have the control of using it when he needs it. But like Aiden, he loves the music, so he wants to hear it, but again, it's the covering, it's not that it's a bad sound, it's just a control kind of thing, and a protection.
I think that organ can be kind of scary for these kids too, because you never quite know what's going to come out of it and how it's going to vibrate. And
You're right.
You'll see, people that don't have disabilities in the sanctuary go sometimes with a low notice it. So the fact that they have some control over, just in case it gets to be too much for them, I think
Exactly.
is good.
And I think you're right, that's when it happens.
I'd just like to add to that Sophie also has a similar problem in the sense that she would not go to a new environment that's very loud. And we had this very early on. We used to go to for example, movie theaters, or even I think we went to an aquarium in Edinburgh. A lot of people, a lot of sound, and she wouldn't enter the area because for her the sound was overwhelming. At that time we did not understand very much what was going on. But reading about it, and we also had a chance to meet a couple of therapists in this area in Birmingham, talking about sensory perceptual disorder, what we learned is that we all have the ability to tune up or tune down different sounds in our environment. So right now there's some kind of a buzzing sound going in the background. I do not hear it, but if I were to ask to be focusing on that sound, then I hear it. What the children do not have is that flexibility of turning up or down the volume of different sounds. And therefore, what they have is when they go into an environment that's too loud, they feel as everything coming at them at the same time, and they have no control over it. And that's what we found with Sophie, and she would just refuse going in. Like one evening we came to a concert here at First Presbyterian. She wouldn't go and sit down inside because there was this big orchestra going in the front, and as far as she is concerned, this is a sound she's not used to, and therefore she thinks it's a threat, and she thinks she can't go in and sit down. And therefore I think using something like a headphone is a great idea. But we are slowly encouraging her to experience different sounds, and like as you had mentioned about the crickets, Sophie can pick up things that you and I don't even know exist in the environment. They kind of pick up little cues or markers in the room and say, "Daddy, it's the same color as your jacket." And I'm like, I never even noticed that there was a similarity in color there. But they have those subtle, I would call it gifts or talents of picking up those patterns. I think that's a great thing. And we have tried to encourage more of that and try to take it into environments that she feels challenged as much as we can.
I have a different question. I think we're all proud of First Presbyterian Church here. I think we are recognized in the community as leaders in inclusion and people with disabilities. But I hope we're not alone. I hope there are other churches who are also striving to be more and more and more inclusive. Have you had experience at other churches? Have you seen that at work in other places, or are the other parents here too?
We were at another parish before coming here, and they they offered a special ed catechism, but it was still very separate from the community. You know, it was on a Saturday where the rest of the community went on Sunday, and it was, and they also had the quiet room, you know, which I always felt like, I don't know, and this is just me personally, I always felt like, you know, if Jesus was preaching, I don't think he'd say, hey, could you take that crying baby to the quiet room? Like, so I just, to me, I just felt like it was still like this divisiveness. And I don't know, when I hear it's more, the aim is to, you know, like with Clayton, to become, you know, our aim for our kids is to become the most independent individuals possible. So if my son can sit through service, and our goal is to get him, you know, and the thing, never underestimate what they're picking up. You know, Aiden was stuck on an elevator at a school, and he said the teacher was just beside herself because she said when the elevator doors opened, he was saying, please, Jesus, get me off this elevator. You know, and then he it's amazing how they surprise you. You never underestimate the impact that, you know, he prays for people when they're sick, and he has a conversation with God when he's in bed before he goes to sleep. So, you know, it's a huge part. And someone once said to me, these kids are closer to God than we'll ever know. And I am a strong believer of that. And so I learned from him. You know, we've had the great gift of learning from him. So
I think too, Joanne and Cindy make it look really easy. As a person that, you know, Clayton was baptized here 18 years ago, it was not an overnight thing, this inclusion program. It's been a brainchild for a very long time. It's had many different forms here. So it's bigger than what it appears to be, I think. And I think I mean, Cindy and Joanne have been amazing creating a program that not just tolerates, but really seeks to figure out how to include, which is kind of, it feels like an overused word, but how to make it matter, not just to tolerate, not just to be okay with, but how do we include everyone in the family. And so I think that I'm not familiar with other churches that have done it, but I am familiar with people who have thought about how to do it within their own church, and it's daunting after 5 minutes, you know. So many have tried, I think, many are trying, but I don't know. It's a lot of work to get this successful. It really is, and it's a tribute to our staff and the congregation. Really, it really is that. Just going to keep at it. And for me, I joke about the little blurb in the bulletin about how you know, during the service, you know, strange sounds, you may hear sounds, or I call that like Clayton's claws, because he, you know, he tends to have outbursts at the most unusual times, and they seem so nonsensical, but if you know him, they're not always nonsensical. You know, and if you talk to him, the first thing he's going to talk about is food. Well, for Clayton, who has such difficulty communicating, I think his brain is working a lot faster than his mouth or his words ever will. But if he talks to you and he says, you know, macaroni and cheese, he knows you're going to answer him. He can't say, yeah, how are you? How was your week? What's new? Nice shoes, you know. He can't do that. So he comes up with what he knows he's going to get an answer about. And as he knows people more, he'll find more specific things to ask. The other thing is singing, you know, Old MacDonald and the basic songs, you know. Yeah. Many people have been caught in the hallway because he grabs them, and then people are very kind and will sing with them, and then I can see in their face, like, how do I get out of this? It feels like Clayton's going to say, okay, that's enough, thank you, that's lovely, you know. So usually it involves me, and it may be similar with Sophie, it involves me actually prying Clayton off. Okay, say goodbye now, and I guess my thought about that is I don't want anybody to feel awkward about that, because that's just how it is, and doesn't mean don't try. And if you have to go, you can say, I have to go, and I'll help you pry him off. But I've just been really touched by people, just in the hallway or nearby who are just, hey, Clayton, and then it's like immediately, he's like a tree frog. And it's very hard to get him to let go sometimes, but to me, that's nice. He knows that there's people here who will talk to him and will engage with him and will help him understand all the sounds and the overwhelming environment that this can be. I mean, any kid, any child, even typical kids, the sanctuary is a huge, loud, bright, weird room with lots of weird things going on. So, if you don't have all your faculties to be able to really process it all, it is a big, big deal.
Absolutely.
So, I would say Rejoicing Spirits is great. My Clayton doesn't particularly love Rejoicing Spirits. And that's okay, we still bring him, he's still, because he can hoop and holler all he wants there. I mean, it is a nice, relaxed atmosphere, it's great. But for me personally, I baptized my kid Presbyterian. It was important for me to confirm him in the Presbyterian church. It's important for him to have the Presbyterian identity. And Rejoicing Spirits doesn't offer that.
No.
I want that for Clayton and for my family as part of our family identity, that we're Presbyterian, that this is our history, this is our denomination. So I guess my encouragement too is, you've got little kids like Sophie, and we're including them every Sunday, and they're coming and they're cute and they're adorable, and they go up and they do funny things, and they go to Sunday school, and it's great. They're going to go to Soul Perch, they're going to become middle schoolers, they're going to get bigger, they're going to mature, they're going to get a little different. It's going to be time to confirm them. And we need to really think about how we're going to adapt our confirmation program, how we're going to be covenant partners, what we can offer. It may not be you may not be the typical covenant partner who wants to sit and talk about the Bible all the time, and or whatever the covenant partner might be called to do. But being a covenant partner to a person with Down syndrome might be right up your alley, because it's a different, it might look completely different. So I think that we've got a good start. And we need to just keep moving forward and thinking that all these kids that we make promises to when we baptize them, we're making them a life promise, and it's a life promise to the family. So I think we all need to move forward and think about moving forward too. What are we going to do as every year these kids get older? What's going to happen when you have 6 Claytons in, while John's trying to talk, So I think that that's the future, and that's what, to me, at this point, is the challenge of inclusion, because I feel like I've kind of gotten past where you guys are, although I totally understand that. Am I going to interrupt everything if I bring my kid in here? But inclusion is a lifetime thing. When I'm gone, is he going to still know that there's a congregation and a church that he's a part of? And will his brothers know that? That, there is people that knew him back then and will continue to. So.
And I feel like our church is really leading in that, and that there's so much room for people to step up and help and be a part of what this church is doing. Jeffrey and I have been to many churches. We've moved around several times and gone to different churches. We've been in leadership where we've been posed the question, hey, we have some friends that have a child that's autistic. Can they come to church here? And even as leaders, we were like, we don't know what to do with that. Yes, they can come, but we don't know what to do. And so at all of the churches that we've been to, traveling around, people don't know what to do. And so if this church can lead the way and putting, something together that can be duplicated, that would be amazing. And I mean, this church is filled with so many educated people that are capable of that. So this church does really have it going on. And just to answer your question, we've been to several churches and they don't have anything that's inclusive like this church is. They have at Kensington Church here, they do some amazing things, but they put all of the kids in one room that have special needs or disabilities.
I think one of the things that Sarah brought about earlier on was about how Joanne and Cindy were trying to figure out something for our child. I think that's a very unique thing, and I agree with Cheryl. The churches we have traveled, we have not been to many churches here in the local area, but even in Scotland, coming to here, one of the first things we found very interesting was we were asked about Sophie to tell about what is her education plan, where she's going with school, and I'm sure Ted will tell more about all of those things. But for us it was like they are interested in knowing more about Sophie, and they want to know how they can make Sophie fit into this community. And I think that's a big impact for us, because usually when we go somewhere, yeah, they want to be Sophie to be part of the class, but again, for a lot of people, it's, as you said, it's very difficult to understand what they do about it. How do they handle a child? What happens when she has a tantrum? How do we handle it? Those sort of little minutiae, which sometimes we think, oh, that's a lot of detail, but that detail is what matters. And I think the detail and the focus here is great. And I think that's the model we have to build on. And kind of going forward into the future, I agree, we haven't come to your stage there, but one of the things we'd like is for Sophie, whenever she thinks in her life that she can go to a group of people that she can talk to and relate to, that we want it to be her church and her local community. And I think making her feel comfortable and kind of wanting to be part of the family and growing into it is a great thing for her. And why is that important? As I said, she has difficulty expressing herself. We all are blessed with that ability to do that. But I think as a church family, if we can stand for these children and for these individuals who are amongst us and be their voice, be their promoters, and be their advocates for their well-being, I think we will do a fantastic job. And we can be those model in the society around us. We can say, hey, I know of a child in our church who has had the same problems, and this is how we deal with it, and we can spread the word to others. That's how I see that growing forward and going into it.
And can I say that, until my child was diagnosed with autism, it wasn't on my radar. I had no idea what autism was. And so when you ask a question, please ask the questions, because I didn't know what autism was. And as I said to you, you meet one person with autism, they're also different. All our children are different. But this place for us as a family has become a safe place. It's been I tell the children at school in the Links program, you're the role models for our children. He comes here or he attends 10 o'clock service because he can learn from all of you what he needs to know how to be a citizen, how we act, how we sit, all of those little things that you take for granted that typical children will learn. So please ask us questions. Never be worried about asking, thinking it's an inappropriate question, because I don't think there are. And again, it wasn't on our radar. We're all still learning. I have to ask, Anne, I know Aiden, but I'm like, well, okay, does he like the hug or not? And I will still stand because I know the senses are overreactive or not. And so those are the issues, but ask. Or if you see a parent in trouble, I remember Jamie went down once, and it was incredible how this community came together after and said, are you okay? They knew, and as you were saying too, we're always worried about what we put on the congregation. There's an embarrassment that does come. And when I had the congregation say, are you okay? That meant the world to us. So, those little things you may take for granted, but they're big things to us.
Cindy Merton.
Sarah, a number of years ago at a conference, you shared a story that for me was very powerful, because I think it speaks to what we as the whole congregation can keep our eyes open. Some things that we can keep our eyes open to. You told about being a young mother with 3 energetic boys and coming to church on a Sunday morning. You know what I'm talking about?
About the friends that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when the kids were little, toddlers, and I had 3 of them, and I was a single mother. There was a couple other families that we were friends with that had children the same age. And another family would come and actually pick up my typical boys on time. Be able to go with them, they could get the bagel, they could do all that stuff you do when your kids are little, if you get dressed, we'll have time to get a bagel before we get to church. That was not even a possibility. So these other families would say, well, have your kid ready at 9 and we'll swing by and get them. And that gave me like a quiet house and some time to pull Clayton together, pull myself together, and come here and meet. And it just felt very familial to have people that came and did that. And they didn't offer to take Clayton, and that was fine. But the fact that the other 2 got to have a little bit of a, typical experience that the other kids had was really helpful to me. And it was really, I always remember it. So it was just a touching thing that they did.
Amy.
So sort of related to both of your comments, you know, I think any parent, when you have a child, your life suddenly becomes about that child, and I imagine that's even more augmented when you have a child with special needs. You know, there's this focus on the child and what their needs are, and explaining their needs and interpreting them to the world and the world to them. How, as parents, are your needs met in this place? How can we as a church better meet your needs as parents for friendship, for connection, for faith, growth in faith, and you know, focus on you all as people as well?
Well, I think for me, sometimes I feel like I come off sometimes as not reliable, because Clayton is not a person that you can decide is going to go somewhere if he doesn't want to go. So I remember there was one night when, you know, the AIM committee did their dinner and jokes evening, and it was going to be great, and you know, I'd been on the committee and it was going to be great, and Clayton was going to come, and it was, you know, the food was going to be stuff he liked, and he just was having zero part of it. And when I say none, you want to see an 18-year-old have a tantrum. And at that point, you know, I was part of the planning committee. I felt like I needed to be there. My kid's falling apart. And so I guess there's nothing that can be done about that other than understand that I wouldn't want it that way. You know, if I could change it. One thing I find, like if social things for me personally, it's easier if, you know, if we're going to have a meeting, it's really easier to have it at my house. And it's not because I want to control or I want to entertain or I want to be, you know, appreciated. It's because it's just a lot easier to be in the same building as my kid. You know, I have caregivers, I have an abundance of caregivers, but they don't always want to be there. You know, I can't always schedule them. So if I say, you know, can we just have the meeting at my house? It's not about me or anything. It just makes me more able to participate in it. So those are some of my thoughts. You know, it's been nice because I've been able to be active in committees and you know, be on session during my time here. And it's been really nice that there's been a way that that can happen. You know, that the inclusion program when Clayton was younger allowed me to be able to serve communion because I didn't have to watch him. You know, somebody else had him, so I could actually get up and pay attention. So it's things like that, which to me are helpful. And also, Clayton's not an only child, so his brothers are watching too, and his brothers feel safe here, and his brothers understand that kids fall apart, that we're not the perfect family, we're not the TV family, and that's okay. So that's another important part, is that it's not just the kid you're helping, it's the siblings, it's everybody else in the family. So.
Along those same lines, how did you get babysitters?
Me?
When you had little ones. If you had little ones, you know,
The grace
it's hard
of God.
enough. Pardon me?
The grace of God. Cindy.
Right, well,
Because there were moments that I thought, what am I going to do? And it would just come down to, please God, solve this, and some perfect 21-year-old lost person would show up at my door. I'll watch your kid. Okay. And then they stay for a time and then they leave. But it's not been easy, and people ask me all that all the time, and I don't have a good answer. I've just been very, very fortunate.
Well, I wonder if we could, as one of our outreach, maybe out of our AIM program, if we could do a training program for our youth that are babysitting on how to, I think our youth are amazingly tuned in to kids with disabilities, which is one of the most wonderful things about our program, is that they grow up together and, you know, it's normal.
Right.
You know, those of us that are older never got that opportunity because the world separated.
Cindy, the other Cindy here, I think, had a comment about your.
Okay.
I just want to say that that's a great idea. I want to just say that has sort of happened organically in a way.
Great.
In that, so Rebecca Stickley, who is one of our inclusion assistants, coordinators, is one of Sarah's caregivers for Clayton. But Rebecca's Greek Orthodox, but she grew up coming to our vacation Bible school from the time she was in the first grade. And in the second grade, she was Kate Kaufman's buddy. And every year after that, she was somebody else's buddy. And this has sort of become a thing with her now, and this is what she's doing. She's working full-time for Sarah. And so I think, these things sort of happened organically, not that we can't do more training like that, but she's not the only one that's happened for, just kind of cool. And I know you've had other sitters who have been.
Well, and Bethany did
But
training
training is
after
important,
VBS last year.
She did,
So all
yes.
the youth who helped with VBS in the afternoons, Bethany worked with them on inclusion and how they can be better buddies. So all those kids at least have some, sense of how to do that.
And also, I think what the church did by bringing in Bethany, who, she's got all the religious stuff that we want for our kids, but she also has the parapro background. She's been trained. So that is a statement that our church is making, that, if you're going to come in and work with our youth, there's going to be an expectation that, if you're not comfortable, get comfortable, or you're not going to be comfortable here. And her skills and her abilities, she just was very natural about what I've witnessed with her, with all the kids with special needs. She's just very natural about it. She kind of has a real good feel for how far to push, when not to push. With Clayton, it was great. So I think, and that's a statement that our church makes, that that's something we want from our staff. If you're, this is who we are. So.
And Sujay, how about you guys in terms of sitters, or giving you guys some freedom and flexibility?
Well, I must make a confession here, and Ted would agree. This is one of the area where that was not on our priority list, if you like. Me and Ted have a very similar feeling that we have to be there for Sophie all of the time. And it took us a lot of time to learn that letting go of Sophie is a good thing. And we always felt like if we let Sophie go and go on our own, we are letting her down. And that's why we never, at least I would say for the first 3 years of our having Sophie, we never went out anywhere. And the first time we ever went out, we ended up talking about Sophie all of the time. And so we were like, oh, this is not right, this should not happen. But now, going forward, I think it's a great idea. We would, we haven't found anybody in the area. I have a colleague who has a daughter who loves to come and be with Sophie, and twice now Jamie has come and been with Sophie when we went out. But that's kind of where we are going. But suddenly, going into the future, I like the idea that Cindy was proposing in terms of having people who can come and, be with Sophie while, if we have to go out or have an evening to ourselves, that'll be fantastic to have, definitely.
I'd add to that I think you just got into something that is one of our biggest challenges is normally, and I get a little, this is my, challenges, I get a little jealous in some ways when people can just, and they have a child my son's age, they can just kind of go, okay, I'm going to go out here, or I'm going to go. You can't, and so especially when there's no other siblings, you feel really isolated. So that the caregiving is a huge thing. And then the caregiving gets more challenging as your child gets bigger and stronger and goes through the hormonal changes, because now those cute little girls that you get to watch, you can't really get so much anymore. It's always a challenge, and it's a huge cost. It's a huge impact, on us financially. So, like you said, we've been really lucky, and this is something I kind of just go, oh God, please help, And that's the thing is, God puts into your life exactly who you need, and we've been able to manage with, high school kids. We've got like 2 boys from the high school, and that is funny because the one time, and then, have we ever been overnight without Aiden? No. And when one time at camp, they said, we're going to take him overnight. And I swear to God, me and Jim sat there and stared at each other all night. We just were like, we were so uncomfortable because we were just waiting for the phone to ring. Then it was like the second time that opportunity came, it was like, let's go. But it's a very strange feeling for us. So to have something that you were suggesting in the training, and you know what, if I was a teenager, or I was 17, 18, or even in college, and I had the opportunity to have a job taking care of somebody like Aiden, I'd be all over it because it can be so fun and you can think out of the box. It's not your typical caregiving. It's not, you know, I tell the young high school guys, you're not a babysitter, you're a mentor. You know, treat him like you would your little brother. You know, if he's doing something that he's not supposed to be, tell him. You know, you're mentoring and you're modeling social behavior. And it can be a really cool job for our younger people in the community to have. But it definitely is a need, a huge need. So.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of people in the neighborhood come to play with Aiden, so that's how he gets his hanging out with the other guys is sort of how we do that. I know you love those guys.
Ann and Sue, Ann and Sarah, share a typical day for Clayton and Aiden. I mean, we both know that Sophie goes to school, but can you share what does a weekday look like?
Aiden goes to school. He's at Royal Oak High School, the old Kimball. It's his first year back in the Royal Oak School District. He's been in Birmingham because Royal Oak didn't have a program for him. So that's where he goes to school. He's in an odd center-based program, so it's a brand new program. He's with 3 other boys. But he is mainstreamed, but for certain things. And I think that was one thing we talked about, the inclusion thing, is how there's a sweet spot. I think we try really hard for inclusion, and we get to a place, and then I think we pass it by to the point where be careful what you're wishing for. It's okay to acknowledge the differences. You know, the inclusion, it's like you come across parents that fight and fight. You know, my kid's included, you know, he's in the typical class, 100% of the time. And it's like, well, and who's that for? You know, like, it's almost like you lose the benefit, or you include so much that you make exception for. Why I went off on that, I have no idea.
Well, it was something I was hoping we'd cover, remember?
Okay,
So
well,
that's-
it's kind of like, we do overkill. I think there's a nice balance where, we want inclusion, but we want it to work. We want it to fit. We don't want to force, Aiden to be in the choir when all he wants to do is go sit in the you know what I mean? It's about finding the right place, the right fit. There's a place for everyone. Where do they fit? And typical day, thank you. Right now, Aiden likes to get up by himself, and his morning time is it's great because we're finally letting go a little bit and letting him wake up by himself. And that was huge because we never, it was always like you had to be up when they were up. Now it's kind of like he knows to feed the dog and let the dog out. And then he likes, his alone time because he's got full reign. It's like he's got the electronics and he's got this and that, and that's his time. But we like to he has his chores. He's learning to help with laundry, and he has his ways of helping his family out and his grandpa. And, he has his nieces and nephews come over.
He needs direction in everything he does, so he needs, you can't let him near a stove, and,
Yeah. Like we're giving him some independence. Like he got dressed by himself this morning, and we kind of just walk away and go, do it, just do it. And then, but the critical thinking there, because we always wonder, would it be okay if we left him in the house alone no. If there was an emergency or something like that, the critical thinking it's not there. So, but I mean, he's got his stuff and he likes his independence. And I took him to a basketball game, and he told me right off the bat that he wanted to go sit with the girls, and Mom, you go sit over there. Which is, kind of bummed me out in a way. It was like, okay, all right, so it's a good thing. So he's getting there.
Clay, because of his multiple disabilities, needs help with everything. So the morning routine is pretty standard, but it's like a morning routine with a toddler. Get him out of bed, I have to get him dressed. He has some ability to be independent. It's always an interesting moment when you open his door. He has to, because he tends to wander and get into things, he has a door that locks from the outside. Don't tell the fire department, but just for his own safety and for my sanity. So sometimes, I go in and see what kind of night he's had. Sometimes he will have taken everything out of every drawer and tossed it all over the place. Other times he's, peacefully curled up in his blanket. So that's always, what kind of day we're going to have. So get him up, he does his breakfast and has his routine, and then he hops on the bus. He goes to Wing Lake Developmental Center. He's in the post-secondary, kind of a high school class, but they don't have really, they don't strive by age, they do it more by abilities. But he's the only blind person, I think, actually at Wing Lake right now. And the interesting thing, Anne was talking about inclusion. When Clayton was little, and we were talking about sending him to school, Birmingham was very into inclusion at the time. Neighborhood schools, send your child home. Your child should be in their home school. It's like, that is the last thing I want. Clayton cannot go to a typical school. I was always an advocate of a special program. And I remember having a discussion with somebody, well, they learn from their peers. Well, when they can see, they learn from their peers.
Right.
When they're crawling around and you have little kids that forget to push in chairs, he's never going to learn to walk. He's never going to trust an environment.
Right.
When he's never going to know that it's okay to move. If you put him in an environment with a bunch of other 4 or 5-year-olds who are crazy and leave their stuff everywhere. So I experienced a little bit of the other side. Like, I don't want him included. I need him in an environment that's least restrictive for him. And sometimes to include a child, the IEP is about the least restrictive environment. And sometimes to put in a child in the wrong environment, it seems least restrictive, but you're actually restricting him more.
Yeah.
So Clayton would be more restricted being in a typical environment because he wouldn't be able to move. He couldn't count on certain things. He does a lot of, at school, he's pretty independent, but they do a lot of tactile support for him. Textures on walls. He has a schedule that has different icons, things that he can feel and hold that tell him, it's time to go, this is the time where we use the bathroom, it's a piece of tile. This is a time where we're at group time, so it's a piece of carpet, because he knows that he goes and sits in the chair in the carpeted area. So there's all kinds of things like that that kind of help him be more independent in his day. But he really needs somebody watching him all the time. Comes home in the evening, gets off the bus. I have a caregiver that's with him from bus time till bedtime. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to find people that are willing to do that and that we have resources. Because one of the things that I struggled with was I had to get over the guilt of I'm a parent, not a therapist. So I can't sit next to him at every meal and make sure he uses his fork correctly and make sure that he holds his cup correctly and make sure that he does all the things that they tell you in school in the IEP meeting. Here's the special silverware you should use at home and the special bowl and the special cup. And it's just like, I can't do all that, So that was something that was very hard for me to realize. And it took a teacher to tell me, you're not a therapist, you're a parent. So that's one of the advantages to having a caregiver is that I do have someone sitting next to him and constantly, use the fork. So I can actually be a normal human being and sit with the rest, with the whole family, and it allows Clayton to be able to sit with us. So in the afternoon, one of the things that's hard is finding things that keep him busy. If he's, if we feel restless, we can go out for a run. If we feel restless or weird, we can put on music, or we can do all those coping things that we as people do. But for someone who's so limited in their physical capacity and their communication, he doesn't always know. So we'll find, we've learned that if he tends to hit himself in the head with things, that means you need to take him down and walk with him on the treadmill for a while. He's restless. He can't say, I'm restless, I need to go for a walk. Instead, he'll just start grabbing everything out of his cabinet and smacking himself in the head with it. Or, so that's part of the reason that he needs somebody with him all the time. To kind of encourage him and help him through all that stuff. So that's kind of how the day goes. He goes to bed at, as early as we can put him in his room with the door locked, and he's safe and happy. And so that's kind of what his day looks like. Weekends sometimes are really hard because he loves his structure. And sometimes he gets really bored, and he can't tell us why he's bored, yet he doesn't seem to tolerate going out. You know, things aren't interesting, so we get to an impasse. We had that yesterday, where I was gonna pull my hair out. You know, he was just wandering, getting into everything, like when your 3-year-old is in a bad mood and just, you know, on a tirade, except he's, you know, 5'8" and very strong, and, you know, opening the oven and the refrigerator and the cabinets and the banging on the piano and moving to the next, you know, and you just kind of follow him around, just like, what can we do? So that's kind of how our days sometimes go.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you, truly, for sharing your stories and your thoughts and sharing your children with us, because better together. I would just want to leave us with one thought as you were speaking about, you know, being therapists and you're a parent. We as a church aren't called to be therapists. We're called to be brothers and sisters in Christ. And so some people have gifts in therapy, have education, training, and that's wonderful, and we certainly want to tap on any of you who do. But what we really care about is having relationship with each other, and all of us feeling that we are loved, and we are welcome, and we are part of the body of Christ, and we are better together. And so my hope is that from this, not only will you feel more comfortable or know a little bit more of 3 families and spreading out the ripple effect to some others, but also about some disabilities. Also, that it doesn't take special training, and we don't have to be a therapist to tell someone, I love you, and I care that you're here, and that I hope your life is better because I'm in it. My life is better because you're in it. So that is our goal and our hope here, is that we just all become a little more comfortable realizing that we all have quirks, whether we're diagnosed with a disability or not. We all have quirks, we all have peculiarities. As Ann and I were talking the other day, we all have bad days. Some of them look a little different. I can get close to a tantrum, just ask Roger. On a bad day, it ain't pretty. We all have our quirks. And so it's learning each other's quirks and peculiarities, likes and dislikes as individuals. And when I build a relationship with you, I know how to better relate to you and you to me. And that's really all this is in a church setting. It's called being part of a family. So I thank you for coming. I so thank you for sharing yourselves and your children. Let us close in prayer. Loving God, you have called us here to be your body, to be every part of your body, not just the ones that have the superpowers, but the ones that have all power and no power. Please help us to celebrate, affirm, and welcome the entire body, because we are so truly better together as we serve you. In Christ's name, amen.